Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Town of Vesuvius Committee of the Whole meeting, May 28th, 2024 at 9 a.m. Council Chambers. So first off, we need the approval of the agenda. And are there any late items, Mrs. Robinson?
No, thank you.
Could we have, thank you, Councillor King, Councillor Poderica, all in favor? Thank you. And the adoption of the Committee of the Whole minutes of May 14th. Could I have a motion to adopt those, please? Councillor Bennett, Councillor King, all in favor. Thank you. And we will now go to staff reports, and that would be the SSMUH, the small scale multi-use residential.
Yeah.
And we have Mr. Garish and Ms. Long here who are going to explain this for us. So thank you very much.
Great, thank you. So let's take the PowerPoint. Yeah, I'm running here. Great. So
You're good.
there we go. So for the council's benefit, I'll just start with some background context again. A lot of these initial slides you might recognize or remember from the February presentation where we went over some of the new legislative requirements that the town has to implement into its land use bylaws to ensure compliance with I guess the shorthand that the province is using to describe this, which is a small scale multi-unit housing, the SSMUH. So legislative changes were adopted in November. A lot of changes here, but the one that we're most interested in is that the province is mandating increased residential densities in the RS zones within the town's zoning bylaw. There's a number of timelines that we're working towards, but the important one that's the amendments today or the proposal today is related to is the June 30th deadline, which we're trying to work with the new zoning bylaw to have ready, hopefully for council's consideration, maybe not as a reading, but a committee before that date. And again, just as some more background slides here and reminders. So the changes to the Local Government Act have introduced this concept of a restricted zone. A restricted zone is one in which the local government zoning bylaw has allowed for only the following, which is single attached duplex, secondary suite, or accessory dwelling. And these are some examples from the town's current bylaw, which shows that there are currently a number of what the province now considers to be restricted zones because it limits the density and types of dwelling units. And we'll just spend a little bit extra time here because it'll come up later in the presentation. But as you can see in these zones too, some such as the R3 allow for 2 dwelling units, but the others are only allowed for a single dwelling unit at the moment. I'll touch on that later in a few slides. I just want to flag that here. So in the context of the town of Vesuvius, some local governments have the ability to only have to change the zone bylaw to allow for 2 dwelling units. So an example I would use, because we would help Karen needs as well, is that that particular local government only had to change to allow for 2. But because the town of Vesuvius is a designated growth area under the South Okanagan RGS and also has municipal water and sewer to most of the parcels in the town, the legislation requires that Vesuvius provide 3 to 4 units per parcel based on parcel size. That's pretty much what this slide is covering. And again, just more background. So again, this council may recall the dividing line between 3 to 4 units, 280 square meters. Not really important, but context. And the province is encouraging the town to look at being flexible with how that density is achieved on parcels. So it's encouraging, again, flexibility. So, look at allowing apartment buildings, townhouses, duplexes with suites, detached with suites, accessory dwelling units, etc. And again, just re-emphasizing with this slide that it affects almost all of the residential zones within the town. There were exemptions that were introduced, primarily in relation to hazard lands. That doesn't really apply to the town, but the province in February did announce an additional extension option or exemption option, time-based. So it's not permanent, but it can be up to 6.5 years to December 30th, 2030. And it's based on infrastructure limitations. And of course, as council's aware, I believe it was at the last meeting that we passed a resolution to submit an application to the minister to request an extension. So in those situations, the ministry is advising local governments that because it's going to take them a little bit of time to make a decision on each submission received from local governments, that they're encouraging, say in this instance, to proceed with the amendments to your bylaw as if you haven't been granted the extension. So I'll touch on this again in a couple of slides, but so what we're proposing is to go forward with the zoning changes that we outlined for you at the February community of the whole meeting. But in the event that the province does grant the town an extension, we have to make changes to that to reduce the density in order to allow for the infrastructure to be upgraded. So that's the direction I'm seeking today. We have a proposal that we think will work. I just want to make sure the council's comfortable with it. So again, some background context of this. This is the density provision that we proposed to you in February in order to ensure compliance with the legislation. And it basically sets out a 3 to 4 parcel, or, sorry, 3 to 4 unit density per parcel requirement. And then again, what we put you in February is that we would change the bylaw to allow for flexibility in dwelling types, and this is what it would look like in terms of allowing apartment buildings to be classed as single attached to townhouses. And again, I know this is a bit repetitious, but this is the screenshot of the actual zone from the draft zoning bylaw that shows how we laid out the types of dwellings as permitted uses. And if we do get the extension granted from the province, how we would change that in the zoning bylaw going forward would be to delete the references to apartment building and townhouse. And so that we're only allowing in each zone either a duplex or a single detached and accessory dwelling with a secondary suite. And we would limit density to 2, and then people could pick from that whether they how they want to make that work on their parcel. This is the density allowance that at the moment will allow 3 to 4 units. If the extension request is granted from the province, we're proposing to replace that. And instead of 3 to 4 units, capping it out at 2. And so what I want to flag for council, going back to those initial slides, is that if we change the zoning to reflect an improved extension and cap it at 2, that's not quite how the current zoning bylaw is structured. The current zoning bylaw, some of those RS1, or sorry, R1, R2, R3, I think R5 zones allows for a maximum density of 1 dwelling per parcel, and some of those ones it doesn't even allow for secondary suites or accessory dwellings. So the proposal that I have before you today would be a variation on that. It wouldn't go back to 1 per parcel, it would allow for 2. But I understand from operations that existing infrastructure can accommodate that, and that we would keep that in place if we got the extension until the infrastructure is upgraded, which one we would then have to change to ensure compliance with the legislation, which means in 2028, 2029, 2030, whatever the extension is granted to, we would then bring in 3 to 4 per parcel and the allowance for apartment buildings and townhouses. So the council is comfortable with that approach, which is again recognizing not quite the way the current zoning bylaw is drafted. We would finalize the draft zoning bylaw. I suspect we would bring that forward for council consideration at the forthcoming meeting. And from there, start the process of public engagement, agency referrals, get some feedback on it, bring that back for council consideration, and hopefully get first reading point in July to the schedule. So that's the extent of my presentation. I hope that I've touched on the important part, which is the density provisions that we will propose if the extension is granted by the ministry. So,
thank you. It is confusing, isn't it? Because we seem to get different things to consider so often that we have to then go back and have a look again. I certainly understand. Do you expect that we might hear back from the ministry before the end of June? Or is that's kind of why we're having to make sure we've got our bases covered, because we might not if they have too many things to deal with?
well, yeah, I mean, I hate to say that. I'm hopeful, obviously, that the province is committed to responding before June 30th, which is the statutory deadline. But I'm also aware that they're probably going to be inundated with numerous requests from local governments seeking extensions, and you know, they have the ability to get back to us. But yeah, it is a challenge because we have to get referrals out and public engagement started, and we need to know what form the bylaw is going to take. And I admit it will be very confusing when we do go out, because we're going to have to present these 2 options, and in the event the extension request is denied, here's what the bylaw is going to look like. But in the event the extension request is granted, well, this is the other way the bylaw is going to work, right?
Is it the Ministry of Municipal Affairs that this gets sent to? Housing.
Ministry of Housing.
Housing, okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. And the other thing is on the attachment 2, which we have included here. There are several references to error, reference source not
Oh,
found.
sorry,
So there must be about 10 of them. So is that, can you explain why that's in there?
that's a stat, human error on my part, so. The way we structured the bylaw, I mean, this is of interest to staff, maybe not so much council, but Microsoft Word allows you to cross-reference within the document.
Oh,
And so what you're seeing there is that we created a bookmark that jumps back to an earlier part of the bylaw if you want a quick reference. But when we moved it into your staff report, that link is broken. And unfortunately, we didn't catch it correctly.
Okay.
So when it tried to find the other part of the document in the staff report, it didn't. make
so
sense.
we just ignore all of those. Okay,
We'll have it correct. It'll be correct in the final version.
Sure. Okay, go ahead, Councillor King.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I guess it's along the same line because there's going to be so many, I'm sure, small towns asking for the extension. And you put all this work in and we don't hear back to say after the July 16th. And we've kind of got to the point of passing what you present. What happens then?
Well, I'm hopeful that we hear from the province in time, but if we don't, I mean, there's still a few other opportunities for us to correct it. So if council grants first reading to a version of the bylaw, we still have 4 units. We still have opportunities up into including the public hearing in which to change that. And I suspect that we would ask council to consider possible amendments at 3rd reading if we hear from the province between first and the public hearing. Another scenario though is that we don't hear from the province until after the zoning bylaw is adopted, in which case I suspect we would have to run an amendment to the bylaw to change the zone to what we propose here.
Thank you. Thank you. So, council, what, we are asked for the recommendation is that the committee of the whole recommend to council that the small scale multi-unit residential RS1 zone and draft zoning bylaw 1395 be revised to permit 2 dwellings per parcel and exclude apartment building and townhouse as permitted zone units, should the town's request for an extension to the SSMUH compliance deadline be approved by the province.
I'll move that.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councillor Bennett, thank you. Anything else? All right, all in favor? Thank you very much. And thank you. Yeah, we appreciate that. So I think,
Terminate.
thank you. Seconder, terminated, seconder. We do that here, terminate. We don't do that at the RDO office. That's not a terminology that is used. Okay, all in favor. Thank you very much.